what do you do with the message of God? What do you do with the message of God? When he says, all right, here's what I have for you to say here, and here's what I have for you to do, and here's what I have for you to say, what do we do? Like, how do we respond to that? One of the most fatal train accidents in the history of railways, or whatever you would say in that term, is not one of those times where a cowboy put dynamite on the bridge and shot it and the train went down. And those accidents have happened. There's been trains that derailed and killed a bunch of people. There are accidents that they go off the bridge or some sort of thing happens like that. But the most fatal one was this train that at this time they had a train car that would go that way. The train, it didn't have a caboose, so it had a train engine that would go that way when it wanted to go that way, and an engine that would go that way when it wanted to go that way. And one day it got stuck in this tunnel underground, and they're trying to get up. The guy had struggle with the hill, and so they eventually started trying to get the gear, and the guy in the engine room started giving more gas and more coal and more smoke and more fire, and it kept going more and more. And the guy in the other engine was also trying to drive him out of the tunnel to get him out into safety, and he was giving more gas and more engine and more fire and more coal. And the train never got out of the tunnel, and more smoke filled the tunnel, and the train eventually was filled with people who all died breathing in the smoke. And it all happened because there were two guys who couldn't decide who's supposed to drive. It all happened because there's two guys sitting there, and they couldn't get on the same page of who's supposed to lead. And as we walk in our Christian lives, as we try to follow Jesus, we move into the future in our lives, one of the questions we have to answer all the time in our lives is, who's supposed to be driving this thing? Who's supposed to be leading? And as Christians, our answer is to say Jesus. God's supposed to be driving this life that we're living. And the question is, what do we do when we get the message from God? So here's our story. And today we're going to have a story that basically centers on two people, John the Baptist and King Herod. And the Herods were crazy guys. They were gross people. And here it is. Chapter 6, verse 14, it says this: King Herod heard about this. Now Jesus, we got his 12 disciples. He's got a whole crew now. And he's preaching. He's doing miracles. He's doing all kinds of things. But it's not just that. He's also sending out his disciples 2 by 2 in groups of 2 to go preach in his name, to do miracles in his name. He's not just getting bigger. He's multiplying. And Jesus is starting to spread around the countryside. It says this: and King Herod heard about this, and he heard that Jesus' name had become well known. And some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. These stories of John the Baptist? We're always getting these clues that something terrible is about to happen. But yeah, that's what Herod's thinking. He's like, John the Baptist is raised from the dead. And that is why miraculous powers work through Jesus. Others said he's Elijah. And still others claim that he's the prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago. But when Herod heard this, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. He's haunted by this man in his palace in the middle of Jerusalem. Here's a question: why do people get haunted by things? Why do people feel like a ghost has come back to haunt them? Is it because they did something really, really good or something really, really bad? Where does the haunting come from? Let's see. Let's see how it worked for Herod. For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, you're going to have to keep track of these little, relationships here. His brother Philip's wife, Herodias, whom Herod had married, because John, verse 18, John had been saying to Herod, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And so Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. But she was not able to because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. Okay, there's some amount of morals going on in Herod. You just don't kill holy people, okay? Anybody remember the hitman from Dumb and Dumber? You don't shoot people you don't know? Anyone? Yeah, okay. All right, we got it. Yeah, we know what we're talking. There's some amount of morality, it's just not a whole lot of it. Okay, he's like, I can't do it. And then here's a fascinating line. This is how you know Herod's a good old modern Western man here. It says, he heard John, and he was greatly puzzled. Yet he liked to listen to him. Isn't that like us? We sometimes hear what God's trying to say to us. We can't make heads or tails of it. We think it's kind of wacky. Why would God care about that? Why does God make a big deal about that? We're still kind of interested to hear the guys speak, right? And finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod had a banquet, and it had all the high officials, the military commanders, all the leading men of Galilee. And when this family is just so broken. When his daughter, the daughter of Herodias, came and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. And the king said to the girl, "Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you." And he promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask for, up to half my kingdom." Now, I'm not a king, but I would not be granted, like, that's half your kingdom, dude. Okay, or whatever. I will give it to you. And he kind of expected her to, like, say something, give me $500 or something like that. And she went out and asked her mom, "What shall I ask for?" And her mom said, "The head of John the Baptist." And at once the girl hurried back in with the king with her request. "I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And the king was greatly distressed because of his oaths, the dinner guests. He didn't want to refuse her, so immediately he sent the executioner with the orders from John the Baptist's head. And the man went and he beheaded John in prison. And he brought back the head on a platter. And he presented it to the girl. And she gave it to her mom. And this last verse is just brutal. On hearing this, John's disciples came and they took his body and laid it in a tomb. And thus goes the illustrious life of John the Baptist. The great man spent his entire life in the wilderness, preaching and baptizing down by the river. And now he spends the last days in the center of the belly of the beast. And there's high officials and there's military people and there's just a party. And one thing leads to the next and one thing leads to the next. And things just got out of hand to where eventually they just went to the disciples of John and said, "Oh, you can have his body back. We don't really need it anymore." And that's it. That's the kind of self-centered, low morality, low view of human life things that happened that just took John from this world. And because this story is so absurd, it actually drives home the point of this message all the more. Because we're talking about what started all of it. What started this great big battle between John the Baptist and Herod? John the Baptist took a stand on an issue. Now, so we're going to divide our time, the rest of the time with this. We're going to look at the issue, and then we're going to look at the issue beneath the issue. And I would say that it's actually the issue beneath all issues. You see, Herod was the son of Herod the Great, who had constantly made these terrible life decisions and yet always ended up with more land and more power. He was just like the worst scum of the earth type person, and yet he was always being given more land and more power. And so he raised this guy named Herod Antipas, who we see in the Bible as King Herod. And King Herod is not really a king. King Herod went and petitioned Caesar and said, "Can you grant me the title of king so I can look and sound better?" And Caesar goes, "Okay, fine." But everyone on earth knew that Caesar was king. Everyone on earth knew that. And so this is the guy John's talking to. And what kind of life lessons do you think this Herod character walks around with every single day? His mode of operation are things like this. There's no situation I can't weasel my way out of. There's no group I can't weasel my way into. There's no situation I can't control by smoozing my way through it. This is just how you do it. It's politics, baby. We're going to make things happen. And then this preacher from the wilderness shows up, and he starts preaching against Herod and his wife, and he's not budging. He's not budging. He's not changing. He's not backing down. He's not winking and smiling and going, "Oh, King Herod, you know you're going to be that way." He's not budging. And Herod's going, "This isn't how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be able to smooth you, and I brought you in because I find you interesting, and it's going to be fun, and let's talk." And he's going, "No, it's not right for you to have your brother's wife." Now, I got to be honest with you. When it comes time for there to be an issue that a person, a Christian, a church, or somebody takes a stand on and says, "Hey, we are against X," that should be an easy one, right? Like, that's an easy issue to be like, I don't have to really go out on a limb to say this one, right? Because obviously everyone's out there going, yeah, it's not a good thing for you to marry your brother's wife. That's a weird setup. And yet, John took this stand on one that should be very easy and lost his head. Because here's a rule for life, and it's helpful. It's helpful in interpersonal interactions. It's helpful just in life in general. And that's this, that the issue is rarely the issue. It could have been anything. John could have been preaching about anything that Herod was doing, and he would have gotten in as much trouble. Because this is how life works. And the fact that the issue in this story is so crazy, it is just absurd, it is over the top. The fact that it's so crazy is what gives us our clue that that's not actually what the Bible's trying to teach us. If it was a more middle-of-the-road issue that the Bible, John's talking about, maybe we would leave going, this is the Bible teaching on kings should be more generous, or this is the Bible's teaching on this, or whatever. No, but because it's so crazy, it's really talking about not just some whatever the issue is, it's talking about the heart of the matter, the heart of the people involved. And Herod is sitting there thinking, I should not have any rules put on me. There are no absolutes. Everything's okay. I can control everything. You should be okay with whatever I choose to do. And John the Baptist is sitting there and he's going, no, I'm not going to budge on that. Because God doesn't budge on that. And this is just something you and I have to practice. And we have to learn, and we just have to kind of grin and bear it. And this is just what it means and looks like to be a Christian or a church in the world at any point in human history. One of the things that happens in this life as we try to follow Jesus is you will get the question, almost every time people learn I'm a pastor, especially every mile I get closer into the city of Winston, I get this question more and more frequently. You'll get the question that says this, you're not one of those Christians, are you? Have you heard that one? You're not one of those churches, are you? And what are those churches? What are those? Some hot button issue that's at play at that moment in time, in that culture, in that place. And they want to know, what do you stand on? Now, and then what they do, they go, you're not one of those Christians that, and then they fill in the blank with, I'm just going to say, be blunt about this, a normal Christian belief. That normal Christians believe. And then I have to just sit there and I go, no, we're not in favor of gay marriage. No, yes, we think marriage is for one man, one woman in life, for life, and we think sex should be saved for marriage, and we think abortion is killing a human life, and they just want to hear you say it out loud. And here's the temptation that comes for those of us who are Christians and belong to a church and want to follow Jesus. The temptation every time this question comes up is, if we just bend here, if we can just play nice on this issue, then we will make friends with the culture around us. And we will have bought relational capital with the people around us. And so it's actually worthwhile to say, Christians used to believe that, but we've kind of moved on. We don't really. And the answer is, and this is super counterintuitive, and I know it's hard, and no one wants to do it, no one wants to talk about it, you don't want me to talk about it, but here's the deal. The best way Christians have ever been able to love their neighbors around them is not by bending and disappearing and melting into the culture around them, but by just being who God calls them to be. And it's hard. We don't talk about this a whole lot at our church because we don't want to get in fights with our culture all the time. We want to engage with our culture, but we don't want to fight, and we don't want to disappear into our culture. But we do want to be what God calls us to be. And the way Christians have always been able to engage with their culture the best was not through saying, okay, fine, we'll get rid of this, and okay, fine, we'll get rid of that. Because there's a time coming where people wake up and go, wait, what kind of life have I been living this whole time? And they will want to find some Christians who are willing to tell them the truth along the way. And it hurts. It's not fun. It ruins a lot of my conversations with people out in places where I meet them. But these questions always come up. And here's what I want you to say. Here's what I want you to understand. And it's something that most of us don't understand because, by the way, I know not everyone in this room agrees with me on everything. I know not everyone agrees with me on life and Bible and everything about and some of you are listening to that list of things that I said, yes, I believe this, and you're going, oh, it's funny you chose those things, Garrett. All the ones you already agree with. You left out all the ones that maybe God would be challenging you on. Yeah, that's my point. This temptation to bend and say, God, I don't really want to receive your message, that comes to all of us. Every one of us has to deal with that temptation. And God, it comes to every last one of us that says, I have the right to speak into your life, and I'm not budging. And here's the deal. Whatever the issue is at the very moment we're talking about is not the issue. There's something beneath the issue, and that is this. Does God have the right to tell me no? We know the emotional weight of that one, don't we? Has anybody ever prayed a prayer and got the answer is no back? God, rescue me, rescue my marriage, help this relationship, make this thing work. Give me an A, and I promise I'll go to church every week for the rest of my life on this test. Anybody prayed that prayer and got the answer is no? You're going to be a C student, Garrett? Yeah? We all know that one. And the question is, does God have the right to tell you no? And here's just the simple fact of how life works. When we say yes to one thing, another thing pops up. And they go, well, what about this one? And then you have to decide, okay, well, do we bend on this one or do we not? Okay, fine. All right, yeah, well, okay, we're good with that one too. And this next thing pops up and goes, well, I'm not going to go that far. And what do they always say? Wait, why do you say no to this one, but you said yes to those two over there? It just doesn't help. And there will always be something. And there will always be someone who's willing to go there no matter how crazy the thing might be. Like, I don't know, marrying your brother's wife. Here's what Romans says. Romans 1 and 2 is a super helpful chapter. No one likes it's brutal because it really just kind of pounds us into the ground, but it's helpful to us because it helps us understand the context of what it looks like to be a human being. It tells us how hard the battleground is in our heart that we have to be able to wage. Here's what Paul says at the end of Romans 1. He says this. Listen to the kind of issues he's going to talk about that he's going to have to take a stand on as a preacher. Here it is. It says, they will become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. And although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, here's the line. Are you ready? They not only continue to do these things, but they also approve of those who practice them. And here's the deal. If you want to run away from God and live your life in any way you choose to live, you will always find people who are willing to go there with you. You will always find people who are willing to go there with you. Here's as if to prove my point. Herod just takes and marries his brother's wife. And he looks at John and he goes, John, you're not going to be one of those prophets, are you? And John's like, yeah, I'm going to be. That's what prophets do. I'm going to talk about the king, okay? And here's the deal. There is this painting by Caravaggio who made this. This is a artistic rendition of this scene in the Bible. This is the executioner giving to Salome, and she got what she wanted. Good for her. Here, let me tell you what eharrisgallery.com has to say about this painting, which is a masterful painting. It's amazing work. It says this: Caravaggio masterfully highlights the stark contrast between light and shadows, enhancing the emotional intensity. The figure's expressions convey haunting senses of sorrow and intrigue, and it draws the viewer into the tragic narrative. So the point of this painting is to point out to the rest of us the insanity of what's taking place in this picture. Okay? And as I'm writing this sermon, type, the whole thing, Instagram sends me a reel that has this girl looking at this picture in a museum, and it has a caption on there. I don't know if you can read it. It says this: "Whatever he did, I'm on her side." Isn't that fascinating? You can always find somebody, you can always find someone who's going to go, you know what? I'm with you. Go for it. Whatever you want to do. And it doesn't matter how much it harms us or hurts us along the way. And what our world needs is for Christians who are just going to be like, look, we love you. We want you around. We like having you. We even like being around you. We like what you can do. We like everything. But we are going to stick with what God calls us to do. And that is because there is this thing, not just the issue that's at hand, but there's this issue that's beneath the issue. That's the human heart. And this issue comes for you, and it comes for me, it comes for people inside this room and outside this room, it comes for all of us, and that is this: what do you and I do with the message of God? Because it's real easy for us to kind of look at maybe, I'll just talk for myself. For me, to look at maybe a cultural thing that's going on or something that's happening on the internet somewhere or some sort of thing like that and go, yeah, look at those people. But God wants to know what I do with His message. He wants to know how I respond when He speaks into my life. He wants to know what I'm going to do with it. Because there's no one in this room who's exempt from this. We all have our problems with God. We all have our problems with what Jesus calls us to do. There's no one who grew up in church and their parents bred it out of us to go, well, I grew up in church, so I'm good. No, that's not true. And if you think just because we're sitting in a church and we serve in ministry that we have exempt ourselves from the battlefield of our heart, then the devil has us worse than we think he does. We're in worse shape than people who don't follow Jesus at all, because we're tricking ourselves into thinking that we don't have anything to work on. And God's going, Garrett, I'm speaking into your life. In Foothills, I'm speaking into your life. And the question is, what are we going to do when God says no? Here's what the Apostle Paul said. Last week we ended by looking at the time John got thrown in jail in Matthew chapter 11. And we saw that even John struggled when God told him no. Remember? Even John looked at him and said, I'm in jail. Jesus is out there getting all the success in the world. I'm in jail. I was his forerunner. I was his buddy. I was his pal. And he's healing all these people. And I'm sitting here rotting in jail. And he wrote Jesus a letter. You remember what he wrote him? He said, Jesus, are you the one who's to come, or should we wait for another? Should we wait for someone else? Did I make a mistake putting my eggs in your basket? Are you the wrong person? Now, let me just say this real quick. If you think your prayer life and the things you're allowed to say to God have to be tame, emotionless, and just some sappy love song all the time, look no further than the question John the Baptist asked Jesus. You can feel his anger. You can feel the letdown. You can feel the emotions, and yet Jesus never rebukes him for it. He's going to go on to say, this guy's the best guy I've ever seen in the world. He's one of the best guys ever. But then he says this, and this is a line that Jesus is going to say, and it's going to be at play all the time in our lives. Just everything that goes on. Every time we wake up, every time we listen to God, every time we open the Bible, this is the line that's going to be at play in our lives, is this. Jesus says, blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. That's not just That's not just saying for people that don't believe in me. No, he's saying people who hear me, who see me, who know what I'm up to, and those things make them want to fall away. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. And Jesus knows that we're all going to be approaching God. And when we listen to his message in our lives, we all are going to have something that's going to hear that, and that's going to be a stumbling block to us. And we have to let Jesus wrestle that part of our lives to the ground. Paul said this in 1 Corinthians. He said, the Jews demand signs. They wanted to see power. Their ancestors lived off of manna in the wilderness. They walked through the Red Sea. Show us something big and we'll believe in you. But the Greeks, they look for wisdom. Wow us intellectually. Tell us something, make this world make sense. Tell us something we've never heard before. Plumb the depths of the realities that we live in. Tell us something wise. But we, Christians, we preach Christ crucified, which was a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Greeks, the Gentiles. He's going, the central message of Christianity, the cross, that Jesus would die on the cross for your salvation, the central message looked like weak cowardice to the Jews and foolish idiocy to the Greeks. They both had their problems with it. They were just different problems. But Paul says, but for those who are being called, both the Jews and the Greeks, Christ is the power of God, and He is the wisdom of God. And so those words of Jesus ring in our ears. Blessed is anyone who does not fall away on account of me. What do we do with the message of God? Jeremiah 29:11 is one of the most famous verses in the Bible, but it's in one of the least famous times of the Bible. People don't usually curl up to Jeremiah at the end of the day and go, let me just see this comforting, weeping prophet talk out to me for 60 chapters. The people of God lived in Israel for 300 years, and for the entire time, God kept saying to them, change your ways or you're going to get punished. Stop the way you're living or you're going to reap the consequences. It's coming. It's going to happen. Well, it happened. They lost the war. They lost the battles. They got carted off into exile, into Babylon, and they were all standing there licking their wounds, and they were waiting to hear from Jeremiah. Jeremiah's going to write us a letter. He's going to tell us what to do. He's going to tell us what God says. We just got to wait for that letter, and that letter's going to come, and he's going to say, God's going to rescue you. He's going to break you out of Babylon. He's going to forgive you. Everything's going to be okay. He's going to tell us we're coming home soon, and they get the letter, and in that letter he writes Jeremiah 29:11. But he also says, I'm not breaking you out. You're going to live in that land for 70 years. So build homes, marry your kids, plant gardens, participate in the city, because you're going to be there for a long time. You can almost hear them all go, wait, time out. That's not what Jeremiah was supposed to write. That's not the message we're supposed to get from Jesus. That's not the message that God's trying to say to us, is it? And then Jeremiah writes this, for I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Here's the thing. That's always God's plan for us. That's always what God's trying to work in our lives. That's always what God's aiming for and working for, and one day going to take us into heaven with Him where we'll experience it forever and perfectly. But at times in the middle, that's not what it looks like. It looks like God's just sitting there telling us no all the time. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. You got to just do all this stuff that I've told you to do. And God's going, I know the plans I have for you. They're good plans. They're plans to help you and not hurt you, prosper you, and give you hope and a future. And the question is, do you trust it? Can we be people who trust that? We're going to sing the song Gratitude at the end of the service. Such a good song. It's a good reminder for us to reposition our minds and what does it look like to live with God. And as Christians, our goal is to live in humble gratitude. To listen and hear what He has for us. Say, God, I can't expect anything more. What I receive from you is beyond what I could ever expect to receive in this world. Herod, He had the mindset that the world and God always owed him more. But we Christians, we need to learn the mindset of gratitude and humbly walk towards Jesus. And in the times when we feel like we're falling away, in the times where we feel like he's just saying no, in the times we feel like he's not talking, in the times where he looks like he's not going to come through for us, what we need to do is just hold on. Hold on and say, Jesus, I know what it looks like here, but I know what I've heard from you. I know you have plans for me. I know you have a hope and a future for me. I'm going to hold on to you no matter what, because Jesus says, blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. You and I know what it feels like to live day-to-day lives, don't we? To not know what the answer is going to be tomorrow, to not know what's going to show up. And we know that this life has already given us plenty of trials we've had to live through, and there's going to be plenty more in the future. But we also know that there's one trial none of us could conquer on our own. There's one trial that we could never handle, cover, or carry on our own, and that is sin and death. And the Bible teaches that Jesus has already come and said, yes, I will take all of that from you. I will take every last bit of it. To when I go get nailed on the cross, your sin will get nailed on the cross with me. That when I go die and lay in the tomb, your sin will go lay in the tomb with me. And when I rise and come into new life, you will come into new life with me. And that is a promise you and I can take every single day if you have accepted Jesus as your Savior, which is always there, offered to you every single day. And when you do, it isn't that God's going to take all the trials away from us. But what he will do is say, you now know for sure that you have a hope and a future with me, no matter what happens. Blessed is anyone, blessed is the man, blessed is the woman who does not stumble on the part of Jesus.